for you people in TV land, we're taping these 1 hour at a time. And we understand some of you people are only getting 30 minutes, the last 30 minutes, more or less. And what is happening, the first more or less part of the show is taken up by reading what's known as Kyroots says, little stories and etc. And the page number of each one being read is being flashed on a gigantic electronic scoreboard right off camera, and the people here in the studio here in Virginia Beach are marking down the ones that they would like to hear an additional comment on. And then I get this list when I come up. Don't ask me who I am, they pick me out. And I'm supposed to look at these with Kyroots' permission, off camera. He still won't come out. Then I'm supposed to look in this and then see if there's anything I have to say. That's the way it goes. It's either that, or if that doesn't work, we'll go back to playing the wheel of Kyroot. Except for the fact I didn't bring a single verb with me. So here we go, and I'll read them and see what happens and see. Fashion, and Kyroots said, fashion as a hobby is in the same category as complaining. Consider fashion, and it does not just have to be in the realm of haberdashery, but you could start there. That is a prime example, but fashion everywhere. Fashion your taste in music. It is the very life blood. It is what keeps alive man's secondary world. What is fashion? We could explain it many ways, but Kyroot got right to the point. Fashion without criticism doesn't exist. You can't be in fashion. Why in the world would you be in fashion to have the latest, whatever it is, haircut, latest kind of up-to-date, fancy clothes, unless you would turn around to others who are not in fashion and go, boy, would you look at that rube. Talk about Hicksville. Talk about a man with no taste. Fashion by itself, which is, there's nothing unusual. This way life goes. But consider, fashion is not enough that you have the brand new record by, I should think of somebody that's just out this week, but the brand new record by Soul de la Soul, or somebody brand new. What good is it unless you can be around somebody else? Of course, if you're in the secondary world, you're going to be around somebody else, or you're trying to be a hermit and you're not going to dance right anyway. You've got to be around somebody else, in one way or the other, for you to have the full benefit of the fashion of your new CD, brand new, somebody, so that you can get around somebody else, like at a party. You go to their house, they come to your house. Some way it's got to come out that somebody says, well, wait a minute, could I play Aretha Franklin's? They got her signed back up and she's got a new album. To where you can, one way or the other, go, come home. You have to be able to make some criticism of other people's attempted fashionable mode of life in some area. Because if you are not involved, Kyroot kind of put it bluntly, that it's in the same category as complaining. Second guessing, if I may, he probably even considered putting criticism. But complaining is kind of more in your face and might be a little distracting for those of you that think you're getting good. Because you cannot be fashionable unless in some way you feel superior. If we were talking about the primary world, that world that would be actually undeniably, inescapably necessary just to stay alive, just to physically stay alive. At that level, there is no doubt about superiority. It comes down to whether you are sitting there as a fine-looking specimen, perhaps of a cheetah, whether you are sitting down to this nice, beautiful meal of a wildebeest, or whether you kind of look off for a minute and you look up and suddenly you're laying on a platter and there's a lion. It's eat or be et. Or, of course, for those of you in Pennsylvania, eaten. There is no doubt as to what is superior. You do not have to involve yourself in criticism. A lion does not have to laugh at a wildebeest and say, boy, I can get you anytime I want to. In the secondary world, there is not, in some intrinsic, in some indigenous way, there is no real physical pecking order. There is no food chain that is natural, that is available at the secondary level. Because in a sense, there is no secondary level. Man has to make it up as he goes along. So making up as he goes along, he has to make up some way to keep track. He has to have some way. It has to be a form of bookkeeping instead of profit and loss for money. The other way is criticism of one another. And one of the points of fashion throughout history, there's been ordinary social critics and other semi-literate smartasses all the way from Greek times right up until today trying to poke holes in the world of fashion, which is easy. Which just shows you how hard up people are in the city to really go off the track, is that people will still buy and get upset about some guy with a suit and a tie, or let's just be direct, some guy in a suit, that he points out. He'll get a film clip of the latest show, you know, Bill Blass or somebody, and all these women voguing down the aisle and people going ooh, ah, and applauding, and this guy will just rip it to pieces. He'll start talking about global warming, hunger, the disappearance of the Edsel. He'll point out all of these serious problems in life and then make literate, sarcastic, sophisticated fun at the world of fashion, like, what in the hell does this mean? Who the hell cares whether a dress goes up 2 inches? And who was dumb enough to go out and throw away all of last year's clothes just to be in fashion? The dress is not it. The suit's not it. Fashion is in the same category. Or not, we've gone this far and spent the whole night on the first one. Fashion is the same thing. They are the handmaidens. They are inseparable twins, fashion and criticism. Because the only reason to be in fashion is so that they turn around and there'll be somebody who's not in fashion. And if you weren't in fashion, you'd be one of them. And of course, also, I do want to take the time, even though we're getting behind, big deal, to point out that this has nothing to do whatsoever with the way, anything to do with, what do you call it, not dress, not music, thinking, that kind of stuff. No relation, it's got nothing to do with that. So. And Kyroots said, if everyone knows it's a fake, it's not fake. Okay. I knew everybody'd get that. You just wanted to hear it again. All right, what do you call this? I didn't think we'd call this. Well, last time I did, no one answered. And Kyroots said, vis-a-vis the ordinary life of the city, for a hermit to live, for a hermit to exist, got nothing to do with this now. For a hermit to live, you still got to have companionship. He must, even if it's just a renewed version of himself. This oftentimes goes by the name of conversion. Who better does a reformed alcoholic have to live with? You guessed it. Not me. Don't send him over to my place. One more time, got nothing to do now with thinking. We're talking about actual drinking and people that's got those kind of cheap problems. I didn't bring them, but there's been several letters, Kyroots told me, of people that, I don't know why, have watched this show and thought that some of this, that we're him talking about kings and drinking and religions and guides, that, well, I started to say you're not going to believe it, but that he said several people wrote and were asking, or trying to figure if this in some way was meant metaphorically. Can you, there's no explaining the. Well, it looks like I've looked at one and made some kind of mark. Should I make some excuse? Or people might think, well, wait, he looked at that one. He didn't know what the hell it meant, or he didn't know what to say. Once the man and the guide had agreed on the wager itself, the deity killed him, explaining that at that point, the game was already over anyway. This might have something to do with something else. I mean, God only knows. Pardon the bon mot, and Kyroots said. But consider that if a man was playing some sort of game of chance, being alive here, forget physically, you got no business trying to play a game of being alive down here in the primary world because it's iffy enough now. It's here. And you engage in some sort of competition, and again, in the secondary world, I could point out another way that money was the original metaphor there. Barter. Because the secondary world is such an invention in comparison to the primary world that you do not have to keep track of the primary world, such as to show someone. You don't have to go up to other people. It's just ridiculous, but I'll say it, to go up to someone and say, I eat more than you do. Assuming, let's say, that you weigh 722 pounds, and the other person just an ordinary size. Or perhaps you go up and you look like this and you say, I haven't slept in 4 days. It's ridiculous. That's not a contest, not for anybody sane. There is no competition. But at the secondary world, we're back to a version of fashion, since it is compared to the necessity of eating and the race, engaging in sex, and you staying alive for your appointed 2 hours, fourscore, whatever it is. You have to, in some way, keep track. There has to be markers. There has to be some way to count this. Even though, like, money doesn't exist, it's just kind of like bookkeeping. You just, so that you'll know how I'm doing. To know how you're doing is the wager. Someone tries to think anew. Someone tries to figure out what's going on. Someone tries to improve, expand what they believe to be the purpose of life, the purpose of their institutions that seem to be most influential to them, their religion, their sense of nationality or race or culture, whatever it is. Anytime you do that at the secondary level, you have engaged in a form of a wager. And taking God, in this sense, we'll assume, is meant symbolically. That the guy pointed out that the game's over. So you've lost. You might as well die if you want to call it lost. Because once the wager has been agreed upon, forget the idea that there's a game. But that's like the fashion. Once you have decided, yes, I'll go along with this, then in a sense, in religions, by the way, those of you that grew up in religions are full of this, about the ideas about as a man thinketh, so he is. Or if you sleep with your neighbor's wife in your mind, you might as well have done it. Which, I've heard that, and like you people, every time that's mentioned in churches anywhere around Mississippi, that gets a real big laugh. Well, that and a whole lot of men look over their shoulder with some. At any rate, the idea that there is some correlation between what a man thinks and his actual behavior. I am suggesting to you that is what this is getting at, is that to keep track, to become fashionable, the game's over. Once you decide, in a sense, where I was going to go with this, if you stand there and you looked at this new clothes, or this brand new CD, and perhaps they're playing it there in the store, and you listen, and you don't even care for it particularly. But you hear some real young, hip people look at the kind of people that affect you, that would impress you, and they're going, whoa. And you find the guy says, yeah, we just got in 2 hours ago. If you make the decision, well, Jesus, $16.95 for that, I don't even like it. And suddenly you decide, though, your hand is about to go in your pocket and you're about to buy that sucker. But you're not buying it just for that. You're buying it on the basis that you're making a wager. You're buying on the basis that I am now going to be fashionable, at least for some little time. It doesn't matter what. I'm not making fun of it. That is the ordinary secondary world. That once you decide to do it, the wager's almost over. The game's over. You're going to buy it, and you're buying it for one reason. Oh, you could explain it other ways, but I'm just talking about, between you and me. You buy it for one reason, because before the day is over, probably, you're going to put that on, or else you're going to talk about it, you're going to have it in your hand, you'll carry it around until somebody says, who in the hell is that? Some kind of crazy name, and then you can, all it takes is kind of a smirk. You just look at them. You carrying it around like you're looking at it in a 7-Eleven store while you're buying some buttermilk or something. And the guy behind the counter says, and he reads the name of this group, used underwear. And he goes, what kind of goddamn group is that? Whatever happened to Merle Haggard and the Rolling Stones? And you don't even have to say anything. Suddenly, the game was already over when you bought it. And sure enough, you had to stop for gas and buy buttermilk 3 times and carry this around like you were studying before somebody said, used underwear, what kind of And then all you got to do is kind of look at him like, you bucolic, dumbass. Get back on that turnip truck and get out of... All you got to do is just look. There was your $16.95's worth. There is the fashion. And it is a matter of bookkeeping. There's nothing wrong with it. It's only ordinary people would say, well, there's something wrong with that. And then another group of ordinary people who would be fashionable saying, you missed the point. And of course, they both missed the point. I just gave you the point. There's nothing wrong. You have just gotten your $16.95's worth, but the game was actually over when you decided, standing there, hearing this, you had never bought it, and you heard it described in such a way that hit you right then that this is fashionable. If I waited tomorrow, it could be on the radio. It might not be fashionable anymore. It might be fashionable in Birmingham. I'd have to run over there and be fashionable. But if I don't get it now, it may not be fashionable. And so once you decide, all right, my hands go into my pocket, the guys might as well have killed you. The game's over, that particular game. Woo! 4 minutes. Could you maybe get a red pen from now on? It gets a little dark up here and mark so that there's no doubt. And Kyroots said, there was a kid that had gone through the marble halls of city thought, and he'd studied this and that about what's going on in man's ordinary secondary world, and then he goes off by himself and he thinks, and Kyroots been through this, we've all pointed this out, and he's speaking about ordinary people, if the admission of one's ignorance proves an ordinary man's intelligence, then how in the hell do you recognize the ignorant? Why would anybody ask for that? And as he continued along in this journey in life, in this fashion, the boy did not attempt to avoid mirrors, but neither did he ever take them to be of any particular consequence. Did anyone find the epilogue to be in any way connected? And Kyroots said, for the real rebels in the crowd, which I must point out to you, or I'm going to, may be connected to one that was quite there earlier having to do with hermits. And Kyroots pointed out, this sentence, please note, does not exceed 10 words. Here's the sentence. The first word is in quotation marks because he's referring to stuff he said before. Alone is a metaphor. I have tried to threaten to skate around the edges of this, and Kyroots even made what appeared to be somewhat jocose remarks, if not verging on dramatic sarcasm, regarding those who would want to be hermits. When it is not all that cut and dried, because in one quite real sense, people who get interested in stuff like this have a touch of potential hermit within them. And it's all real iffy, and the balance is very shaky, because if it goes too far, then you just become a critic. If you're illiterate and can get work and got a suit. And if not, you just become an old sorehead. You might become a ditch digger, and every time somebody goes by in a good car, you kind of go. But there is a kind of touch of hermit, but it's on the basis that what you find in the city, that which you found when you were growing up, that which you turned to your parents, and your priests and rabbis and mullahs and everybody, and you couldn't find what was going on. And it's in a sense like, well, to hell with it, I'll just go off by myself. I'll just go off and be alone and see what happens. Alone is a metaphor. 60 seconds. It's a lifetime. Well, it can't be a lifetime like if you're in a woman's closet holding your breast and her husband poking around the bed and hollering, I know somebody's in here. So I've heard. Well, folks, is da-da-da. I guess we'll end. We got 30 seconds. And Kyroots said, this is a man who wrote in, a viewer, and he's referring to something that happened last time, if you remember. That there was a Kyroot, it was about a guy who showed up at a psychologist convention, and he made this speech that he said that in his opinion, in our particular field, there's far too much mention of molecules and cells and stuff like that. And this guy says that he thinks that that same kind of attitude applies, or should apply, to what we're doing on these shows. And then he points out, he tries to do an update of a very old maxim, which, based on the reaction I felt earlier, maybe all of you don't know, but it's known about I think it's from the Greeks, about whom the gods would destroy, they first make, and there's been several versions, they first make mad, or they first cause them to be religious. He try to do an update. We're completely out? Oh well. He says, those whom the gods would distract rather than destroy, they first think of man as a real life physical creature. Bye.